of documents by the lawyer for Ms. Mahlangu. We've just been handed it a minute ago. We have not had an opportunity to look through any of those documents. I'm not sure what the intention is, but I'm just alerting you that we have received documents. We haven't had chance to peruse them, and to the extent that there'll be any reference to it, we will need to consider it properly before we can continue our questioning.
Yes, Mr. Musi, good morning.
Good morning, Justice.
What documents are those? Sorry. Mr. Musi, good morning.
Good morning, Justice.
What documents are these?
These are email communication, which for the period, I think 2015 to 2016, is the letter which the witness referred to the Nihau meeting which was held between the witness and the Premier and representatives of Nihau. It is a copy of the memorandum that was handed by the families to the department. There is also a blow-by-blow response to the questions in form of a memorandum by the HOD in the letterhead. There is also a report by Dr. Manamela after the transfer. The report talks about the Life Esidemini termination project from the beginning. It talks about the challenges, it talks about the transportation, it talks about the support that was given to the NGOs and patients after the transportation. It talks about also the fact that the patients were assessed. It's basically an overall report. It talks about generally the risks that were there and what was done by who. Basically is that. Also added to...
How many pages are they?
They are 392.
And how are they going to be admitted into evidence?
The documents, the witness referred to them in her evidence in chief. She said, for example...
No, I don't want you to say anything about the witness's evidence.
Yes.
I want the description, the nature of the documents for you to describe, that's all.
Yes, most of them are official documentation. They are departmental reports. There is...
I think what we should do is this. I think the documents must be given to advocates in Kuchana, and over time you must try and, with his junior, systematize the documents and give them ELA numbers, which is the system we are using to admit documents. And at some point, we'll have to see what we make of them. Documents are not evidence in themselves, as you know. They may be valuable when evidence is tendered. So for now...
If I may, Justice.
No, you may not until I finish. For now, you will hand them over to Advocate Nkuchana. He must systematically look at the documents, and then let's give them a serial number so that we can refer to them. Only then might they become valuable. What do you want to say?
I wanted to say, Justice, when we left on Monday during the course of the proceedings, the witness made a request to go back, look into her documents and emails. That request was granted. These documents are being handed in line with that arrangement.
Very well. there is a system in which we hand in documents. I've just told you about it. So give them to the evidence leader, and they will, and Ms. Hina, and they will look at them, make of them whatever it is, and then give them serial numbers so that we can ultimately read them into the record if it becomes relevant. Okay.
Thank you, Justice.
Thank you. Ms. Hassan.
Thank you, Justice. Good morning, Ms. Mahlangu.
Good morning, Council.
We left off yesterday with your response to a letter from SADC dated 26 November 2015. If we could just return to that letter, we dealt with the issue of hospitals and what the state of play was at the hospitals, but there are a number of other aspects in that letter that we didn't look at. So if we could just return to that letter, which is in file 1, and it begins at page 169. And at paragraph 11 of this letter, there's a long list of questions that are posed to you. And the questions are quite detailed. They concern questions about the budget, whether the NGOs have been assessed, renovations to old hospitals that are required, and importantly, how the department plans to communicate with the families. You've seen paragraph 11.
Yes, I have.
It's common cause that these questions went unanswered. Is the reason for that because you instructed senior management to get the lawyers involved?
Good morning, Justice, and
Good morning.
to the councils, family members present here, and the members of the media. With your permission, Justice, may I raise a concern?
Yes.
When I arrived in South Africa on the 10th, I was welcomed by the police at the airport, and at that time, I did not take it serious. They told me they were from crime intelligence. Yesterday, in my house, as I was perusing through documents, there was a drone hovering above my home. I do not know what to make of this, and I do not know why I'm being harassed, because I came here voluntary, and there was no reason for anyone, and there's no reason for anyone to harass me, because I am committed to work with government to ensure that the families find closure. I thought it's important for me to alert you of the concerning developments around me and within my family. Thank you.
Well, at the airport, what did the police do? What did they say they were there for? Did they?
Firstly, there was an unusual passport check when we come out of the plane. And as I was going through in the first batch of people who came out of the plane, and passports were being checked just before you start walking in the airport building. And so something said to me, there's more to this. After I picked up my bags from the carousel concerned, 2 police officials approached me. They said they were from crime intelligence, introduced themselves, showed me the police cards. They said to me they were sent by their bosses. Reasons explained as to why, actually, I'm not sure what were the real reasons. But as I'm saying, I did not take note of, I just thought probably they are doing their work. I did ask them how did they know I was in the plane, because I didn't do traveling arrangement through any traveling agents. I did them directly with the airline. But they didn't answer me, and I did not expect an answer because they said they're from crime intelligence. But when the drone was hovering above my house yesterday, I started asking myself questions.
What kind of drone was it, and could you assess what was the source of the drone?
I mean, drone is like something that flies around, probably looks like a bigger, whatever. I've seen a drone, I just don't know how to describe it, but I know how it looks. It was hovering around the house, and someone observed it, the security observed it, and after a circling a couple of times, and it moved away from the house.
So there's a known electronic drone hovering over your home. It wasn't just the sound of a drone, but
no, there is a drone. There was a drone. There was a drone. Yes.
And have you managed to gather any more information about its source and why it was over your home?
No, I have not. I thought I must raise it formally because,
yes.
And I did inform the MEC for community safety about it. But I think that as a chair of the arbitration, I thought it's important for me to alert you of the developments around me. Thank you.
I've assured you before, I'm deeply concerned about your safety and your ability to be able to give evidence so that we can go on with our work. Counsel for the state, could you be useful at all? I'm thinking of asking you and your attorney to inquire from the Police General who was here present, whether they are aware of these developments and what they might mean. Is that something that the state can do?
Thank you, Justice. For the record, we've been informed that the General Johnson is on retirement, but we will make inquiries with the relevant officials and try and gather some information as to the activities which are said to be taking place. And
General Johnson, who came to testify here?
Yes, we have been informed that he is now on retirement, so he's no longer in the service. So there are other officers within the SAPS that the department will make contact in order to ascertain the activities which are being said to be taking place, in order to ensure that safety is provided in these circumstances.
But would you ask them to find an explanation for the specific complaint raised by Ms. Mahlangu?
We will do so.
We'll do so, and hopefully if you could report to us at the very latest tomorrow morning so that we know exactly what is available, what is known, and what the police activity means.
We will take all effort to give a proper report.
Thank you, Counsel.
Thank you.
Ms. Hassan? Is there anything else you want to say in this regard, Ms. Mahlangu, before we continue with the cross-examination? If you remember, a question had been put to you, but before you answer, is there anything else you want to say in the light of the request I've just made to the State Council?
I am happy with your action, Justice Musanaki.
You are happy.
Thank you.
Very well. Thanks. The question was in relation to page 169 and the letter written to you by the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and Counsel had a few questions about the questions in the letter.
I'll repeat the question
Yes, please do.
for the witness's convenience. The question was to you that these requests for information and other questions in paragraph 11 were not answered. That is now common cause. And it's because you instructed senior management to get the lawyers involved. Isn't that so?
Thank you very much, Counsel. Justice Moseneke, may I put it on record that throughout this process, I did not instruct officials not to work with all stakeholders who had interest on this matter. On this email concern that the council has raised with me, in looking at some of the documents that the council was saying would contain in this file that I'm requesting that it be considered for as part of the exhibit, is a trail of documents that indicate to me the correspondence and meetings between the officials led by the HOD together with the officials of the department, with SADC, with Section 27, and minutes thereof whether the department agreed to certain things and the next meeting things are not being done. So, and also to state that part of what also I'm presenting here is you'll see in the preceding email to this is that there's a meeting that is requested to discuss these matters supposedly on the 30th of November. And in the trail of email, you'll also see that I was prepared to attend that meeting to discuss these matters. However, it clashed with the legislature sitting, and again, there is in this file a speakers list which demonstrate that I was going to speak twice in the legislature on that day, and therefore it's important I brought this exhibit to demonstrate a willingness on my part to have been part of that meeting to look at these issues contained in this email. However, due to legislature commitment, I could not attend the meeting. And at no stage, and I'd like to repeat that, did I say to the officials, please do not work with stakeholders, because in the HIV and AIDS program, we're working with all stakeholders, even those that were not part of the AIDS Council initially. Thank you very much.
Okay. You've answered only one part of the question, to deny that you instructed anybody to do anything. But when we dealt with the letter on Monday, the letter, the wording in the letter was, please get our lawyers involved. Take leadership. These NGOs are dishonest. So what I'm saying to you is that the reason the questions went unanswered was because you did say to your officials that these NGOs are dishonest. In other words, don't work with them. And you copied your lawyer in that very email.
Through you, Justice, again. This communication was internal in the department in the course of work as we're engaging with the department, particularly the officials. And part of the reason why the lawyers will be involved, because throughout the processes of at least where I was aware of, and in my engagement with the HOD in the main, is the involvement of lawyers from Section 27 in formal meetings. So therefore, when we engage with Section 20, or the HOD and the team engage with Section 27 and the lawyer come into the meeting, and I thought it was necessary for us in whatever we do so that the lawyers that are working with the department get notified of of the communication between us. And when I asked the officials to take leadership, it was not to set them and to say, go and do illegal and wrong things. It was simply to say, we must demonstrate our ability to lead and to ensure that issues that need to be resolved are being resolved, not to skate around the issues. And that is really my honest and my genuine answer to the matter, as you are interpreting the communication to mean that I said the officials should not work with the NGO. That will be simply to the contrary of the view I hold about NGOs.
So the letter wasn't from lawyers to you. That letter was from a civil society organization involved in the field of mental health. Isn't that so?
Council, I was just I gave a context on how
I just want to answer that letter. So it's not about other circumstances and what you've done elsewhere. This letter came from a civil society organization, not from lawyers. Do you agree?
Through you, Justice.
Yes. Let's get back to what we did by the time we adjourned.
Yes.
Listen to the question and try and, in fewest of words, try and engage the question, answer it. We can't prescribe the answer, but we can insist that you at least answer the specific question. That will allow us to be able to move on. So please listen to the question and just come to it as briefly as you can. It may, there are times, Ms. Mahlangu, when explanation may be necessary, and there are times when it would not be necessary. So just listen to the question and try to engage with it. You can be sure there'll be many others that will come. For you two, it's better to keep them, as they say in Swahili, body, piece by piece. So just take it that way, step by step. It will be much easier. Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. Do you agree that that letter was sent to you by a civil society organization, not lawyers?
Yes, the letter was sent by Civil Society Council, and I would like to, again, through you, Justice.
Yes, she's going to come back and
Okay,
say, but why did you say this? Then you explain that, and so on. So if you try and explain it all, you're really inviting even more questions, and we're making little progress.
Okay.
Letters from civil society, yes, and then the next question will follow, inevitably.
Thank you.
Is it your position that you were willing to engage with civil society organizations and that you were not distrusting and dismissive of them? Is
Thank
that your...
you, Counsel. No, it's not my position. As I said, in the interaction in the emails, I was committed to attend some of the meetings, but due to other commitments, I couldn't.
Were you distrusting of the organizations?
I have no reason to. I had no reason to distrust anybody.
And what is the name of the lawyers that you asked to be involved?
I think
in that email.
On this particular instance, I think it was Qedani Mahlangu. I think it's the name of the law firm.
Are they private attorneys?
Yes, I think so.
So you use private attorneys rather than the state attorney, is that so?
We use both state attorneys and private attorneys on different matters of the department.
In this matter, you use private attorneys?
I think on some matters we use private attorneys, and
in this
others,
matter?
I don't know how many other lawyers or other people that HOD consulted, but I think on the specific correspondence that you're referring to, it would have been the private attorneys concerned.
Private attorneys. And that would have come at a cost to the department, isn't that so?
Yes, of course.
Yes. And on Monday, you told us that one of the cost-saving measures of the department related to litigation against the department.
Yes, indeed, I did say that.
Yet you spent public resources in this matter in order to avoid answering the questions in paragraph 11 of the letter, isn't that so?
I do not agree with your assertion, Counsel.
Do you know what it cost to engage the lawyers?
Well, I wouldn't be aware. The HOD and the Chief Financial Officer would know the real cost. I do not get involved in procurement processes.
We'll return to the issue of procurement in a moment. If we could look at the termination of the contract. Whose decision was it to terminate the contract with Life Esidemini?
Through you, Justice Museneg.
Well, currently, the Life Esidemini Arbitration Hearings are taking place in Parktown in Johannesburg, where former Gauteng Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu is testifying for day 2. Of course, we'll get back to that as soon as we get our trans-efficient beat. Let's have a look at our question of the day. Of course, we have been asking you, how do you remember Hugh Masekela? Please send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. We have been having a look at some of the tweets coming through, many sending their condolences and tributes to not only the man that he played with regards to his role in music, but also the man that he was, and describing his personality. We do know that for 30 years he was an ex
Shall we proceed?
Thank you, Justice. Ms. Mahlangu, my question was in relation to the reason for the termination of the contract. Let me try to make it a bit easier for you. You say that the reason for the termination in your evidence in chief was twofold, and you'll add if there's anything I've left out. One is to comply with the policy of de-institutionalisation. Is that right?
Yes, I stated 3 reasons, yeah.
Pardon me?
I'm saying I stated 3 reasons.
Well, and one is de-institutionalisation?
Absolutely.
Yes. The other was costs, that you needed to cut costs. Is that so?
Yes, it is.
And what is the third reason?
Was the concerns raised by the Auditor General.
And what was the concern raised by the Auditor General?
As I said in my statement through you, Justice,
Yes.
that the Auditor General, when they take the sample of audit items that they audit in any department, they will say this contract and that contract is not in line with the public supply chain regulations which are coming out of the Public Finance Management Act. Therefore, if the department does not do anything about it, it is likely to end up in findings by the Auditor General if you're not doing anything about it. So it is in that context that I'm raising this matter.
Was the concern of the Auditor General that there hadn't been a tender?
Yes, all government contracts have to go through tender, through you, Justice. That is the Public Finance Management Act, and that is derived from the Constitution.
That's fine, I understand the law on that. Did you embark on a tender process for awarding contracts to the NGOs?
Well, the officials can answer those processes. I would not get involved in that. The law is very clear, through you, Justice, that politicians cannot and should not and must not get involved in procurement processes.
You have oversight, don't you?
Yes,
and
yes,
the
Councillor.
obligations in Section 217 of the Constitution bind you, isn't that so?
Through you, Justice, may I ask Council to allow me to complete my sentences or my replies?
Certainly.
Because she continues to interrupt me as I try to answer.
Okay, complete the answer.
I was answering the question on the role of politicians in supply chain processes, that politicians are not allowed, should not, must not, and must never get involved in any supply chain processes. In respect of following on understanding whether procurement processes have been done in any project, we can only ask, and when the answer in this particular instance related to the NGO, did you follow the processes, all the legislative requirements? If the answer was yes, in all the meetings.
So you asked and the answer was yes?
Yes.
And you are familiar with Section 217 of the Constitution?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Do you know now whether the contracts were put out to tender?
I don't know. I didn't ask
You
that.
still don't know?
Yes, I didn't ask the
But
question.
before
about
the
supply chain.
decision was made by the collective, was that matter ventilated? All we could do is to tender and invite other service providers so that we comply with the law and the AG's concerns. Did the collective consider that?
Through you, Justice, once we've taken a decision and the administrative process is started, throughout the reports, when the officials were indicating, and it is in some of the documents that I was referring to that are in the document, that to say the transport plan is in place, the planning, the project plan is in place. This meeting will indicate we've looked at the NGOs, they meet the criteria, they do all of that. The expectation is, because these are not officials who started working yesterday, they have been in the system, they know the law. The expectation is that they should comply with all legislative requirements, including supply chain.
My question is, did the collective consider whether or not to place the contract or the service provided by Life Esidemini to tender?
I'm not sure exactly about that aspect, Justice.
No, you give us 3 grounds for cancelling the contract. One of these is the AG is concerned about the non-tender of a long-standing contract.
Yes.
So the question is inevitable. It begs an answer. Did the collective, before making the decision, consider to tender the contract so that you invite more and other, maybe more competent service providers?
Thank you, Justice Moseneke. My role, or any role of any politician in any scenarios relating to that, to make a decision, and the expectation is as to the procurement processes, and those are the pure responsibilities of the officials.
But when they said to you, this contract has been here since the 70s or 80s?
79.
79. It's a legitimate concern. Didn't you automatically say, put the service to tender? Invite the broader public, and let's see what comes out there. Why is the only response to cancel rather than to tender?
And if, thank you, Justice, for your question. If you, just give me a minute just to go back to my statement when I said the initial indication of the beds that were going to be utilized was government hospitals which were either no longer used or that were no longer in use, like the old hospitals where we have built new hospitals and all of that. That is the answer I gave on Monday. And I even said, in those, at the time, we were informed that most of the mental health care users from Life were going to be accommodated there. Then when the officials changed direction to then go to the NGO's direction, they indicated that the NGO's move was because they have been there are a lot of mental health care users who were already with the NGOs. And they'll either add patients there or there will be new NGOs.
Well,
as to the process of procuring those NGOs, I wouldn't be sure exactly how that works administratively.
Well, let's go back to ground zero again. We're talking about the tender. I'm asking, did the collective consider to tender in the light of the longevity of this contract, which was a legitimate concern? What are you saying? You say, did you consider that or not?
Justice, I would
or are
not
you saying we didn't consider because we're going to place them in other hospitals? What is the answer?
It just my understanding was that because you're going to place the mental health care users in other hospitals or within NGOs, as to how NGOs are procured, because they've done it before, I wouldn't know the actual details because that is an operational matter done by the officials.
I'm not sure still, for my MEC, what the answer is. Did you ever sit and say, let's tender, and bring back the answer no because we have other hospitals? Or did you simply say, we're not going to tender, we're going to shut it down, and what would be the consequence? Lead us into your reasoning, your deliberations, so that we understand why the decision that was taken by your collective led to 143 deaths. So we're entitled to understand what was happening in your discussions. Why did you decide to get the guillotine down when there are a number of options? Can you respond to that?
Again, Justice, may I say that discussions relating to any procurement decision, politicians are not involved in those processes, and I was not involved in those processes, and that is in accordance with legislation.
But did the collective, in deciding to shut down or to terminate the contract of Life Esidemini, that's where council is, did it consider the option of a tender?
In the meetings where I was part of, Justice, I do not remember us discussing any issues relating to tender as an option and all of that.
Council.
Thank you, Justice. Ms. Mahlangu, are you saying, you said that the officials changed direction and went to the NGOs. Are you saying that it wasn't the plan to use NGOs at the time the decision was taken?
Council, I did say that the initial plan was to get mental health care users to number of government hospitals prior that were no longer used. The numbers were going to go to NGOs at the time when I answered the first question in the legislature. The number was smaller than what finally ended up being in. That is what I'm saying, which is what I said on Monday again.
Okay, no, that's fine. So the plan was from the beginning that there would be some number of patients that would go to NGOs.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But it was far lesser than the numbers that we ended up going.
We'll get to the numbers, but for now, I'm just asking you about the decision. When the decision was taken, there was a plan. The thinking was that the patients would go to NGOs as well as hospitals.
Absolutely.
But the bulk would go to hospitals.
Yes.
And in respect of the NGOs, was that put out to tender to see which NGOs could provide the best service, most efficient, most effective service for the money? Again,
Council, issues of procurements and tenders, I would not be party to those discussions at all. The Public Finance Management Act is absolutely clear on how procurement procedures are done. If I through you, Justice,
yes,
if I sit in a meeting with officials and say to them, put this policy or this implementation decision through a tender process, and then tomorrow they appoint someone who may know me or who may know my family, whatever, then the allegation will be the MEC influence, or she said people must go on tender because she wanted to influence us otherwise to appoint her friends and all of that. So the decisions around procurement, what you procure, for what purpose, in line with the mandate of the department, those, through you, Justice, are solely the responsibilities of government officials who are employed in respective of doing
But
those kind of
means, didn't your officials tell you how they're going to procure the NGOs?
No,
how are they going
didn't
to
say that,
identify them and choose them and capacitate them? Didn't they tell you that?
Justice Musaneke, what I was short in the file that I'd like to refer to, the checklist, I think I've seen it in one of the files that Advocate Ngutana gave me. The checklist as to what are the criteria that are being assessed against the requirement of policy, those are presented to me to have been adequate requirements for NGOs to meet. Then the question is, then did you direct them to go and look for supply?
No, we don't have to go that far. So they told you that here is a checklist and these NGOs are good for purpose.
Yes, absolutely. And the documents that the council was referring to this morning that he helped me to source, and I looked around, and they talk about that, the identification of hospitals and NGOs, the involvement of different stakeholders. It will talk about the placement plan. It talks about transportation plan in respective organizations. It also talks about NGO budgets and all of that. So that's what I'm referring to. When you receive such reports, that gives you assurance at any given point in time. My assumption is I had no any other reason to doubt the information that I'm being given.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. I'm sure the advocate will take you there. Let me leave you with this one thought, which might save a lot of time and pain for all of us. Remember, you come at a time when we've heard Mr. Musinogi. We've heard H.A.D. Manamela, Dr. Manamela, head of the directorate. We've heard the HOD. We've heard Ms. Anna Jacobus. And each one of them told us what your role was. And that's still going to be put to you.
Okay.
So every single one of them was asked very carefully what your role was.
Okay.
So when you answer questions, just keep that in mind. There are going to be many questions which are going to come back, and you're going to be taken to the specific things they've said, some of which I looked at this morning. So just keep that in mind, that there is a whole body of evidence and paperwork which relates to you and your role in the decision-making and in the directing of the project.
Okay.
And your answers should just keep that in mind, and that you are under oath, counsel.
Thank you, Justice. Ms. Mahlangu, just to clarify the point, are you saying that as you sit here today, you don't know if a tender process was followed?
I was assured all government prescripts and regulations were followed, and supply chain is one of those, which means it's simply tender processes.
And you say that the bulk of the patients at the time you took the decision were to be transferred to state hospitals.
At the
Right?
time, and
At the
things
time the
changed,
decision
yes,
was
and
taken.
then things changed.
So that doesn't make sense of your second reason for termination of the contract, which you say is de-institutionalization. Isn't that so?
On what basis, Council?
Well, de-institutionalization, the policy, we've been through it a few times in this hearing, is about integrating mental health care users into the communities. Isn't that so?
Yes, it is.
And to remove them from a hospital environment.
Yes, it is.
Yes. But you're saying at the time the decision was taken, the bulk of the patients were to be sent to hospitals.
Yes, indeed.
And is that consistent with the policy of de-institutionalization?
Yes, that part is not consistent with the institutionalization, and I think that is why there was a turn of events to look at to use the NGOs in the majority. And again, bearing in mind what I said in my statement on Monday, or through the cross-examination, that I was assured that there were more than 10,000 mental health care users already in Gauteng that were already with the NGOs since then the Mental Health Act was promulgated.
Now, I take it you're familiar with the national policy,
Yes,
the strategic framework,
Yeah.
the 2013 to 2020.
And the Gauteng one as well.
So if you look at that document, if you look at that policy, and it's in the record just for ease of reference, yeah.
Which page?
Sorry, Justice. It's in file 4. And it begins at page 1358.
Of course.
Okay.
Do you have it?
Yes, I do.
Do you have it, Ms. Mahlangu?
Yes, I have it.
So the relevant part that I would like to take you to is on page 1365.
Mm-hmm. Who can see me?
And it's at paragraph 12 of the policy. And what the policy says at paragraph 12 is that de-institutionalization has progressed at a rapid rate in South Africa without the necessary development of community-based services. This has led to a high number of homeless, mentally ill people living with mental illness in prisons and revolving patterns of care. So what the policy is saying is that there's an inadequacy of community-based services for mental health care users. That's what it's saying. You agree?
Yes, I'm following.
Okay. And then at page 1369, it says these community mental health services will be developed before further downscaling of psychiatric hospitals can proceed. Now, given this warning from the policy document and the fact that the NGOs required strengthening, the decision to terminate the contract on the basis, and the one reason being de-institutionalization, didn't comply with the principles of the policy. Isn't that so?
Through you, Justice, the point I'll keep making is that information presented to me at all material terms suggests that the NGOs had capacity to do the work. The NGOs had the necessary staff to do the work, and they were being monitored and supported by the department. Of course, post the placement of the mental health care users, it turned out that what was said and told to me in meetings was not necessarily the truth.
So you're saying that even though the National Policy Framework document is clear that de-institutionalization has progressed rapidly, and it's been done basically what the policy is saying is haphazardly. There hasn't been a development of community services before de-institutionalization takes place. You were satisfied that that was not the case in Gauteng?
With the information at my disposal at the time, I had a sense that the team knew what they were doing. Moreover, I was working with qualified, medically trained people. I had no doubt, I had no reason to doubt the authenticity of their report, as well as what they'll say to me. We have checked this, we've checked that. So I had no reason to doubt or to disbelieve anything I'm being given.
So you say it was the officials who misled you?
Yes, because every information I present in any situation, I get it from the officials. Unless I walk into a hospital or a clinic, I find something to the contrary what I've been given.
Let's put faces to the officials who assured you that the NGOs were ready and well-resourced to receive mental health care users.
It was in our formal meetings when I asked for meetings to monitor. The HOD will be present. If it's not, Dr. Libete, as well as Dr. Manemela when they give report, and Mr. Nochi as well.
So it would be Mr. Senochi, who was a project leader.
Absolutely.
Appointed by you as project leader.
I did not appoint Mr. Musenochi.
Okay, we'll come back to that. And it was the HOD, Dr. Silibano.
Yes, in his absence, the acting HOD will be Dr. Libete.
And the HOD, Dr. Libete. And Dr. Manamela. Those four assured you that the NGOs were well capacitated and ready to receive mental health care users.
Yes, yes, Justice.
Did you scratch any deeper than that, besides their assurances?
Justice Moseneke, as I said, and I continue to say, at the time, I had no reason to worry much about the concerns. I did not have reason to be concerned about anything. Maybe let me elaborate to give an example. If someone said, or if one CEO hospital and say to me, we have so many experiencing a challenge or we're experiencing, what example to give? If, for instance, the head of trauma, whether it be Charlotte or Christiane Paragwanath, will say to me, MEC, we're having so many patients we're seeing every day, and this is the impact, or this is the number of staff we have, and we're running services absolutely fine. I have no reason to doubt that information because they are on the ground, and I'm using that as an example. And I can use many, many others. Or we have challenge X and Y and Z and Q. Once they alert me with the challenges, I'll be able to act on those challenges and ensure that those things are resolved.
You know why Council took you to the National Mental Health policy framework and strategic plan.
Yes, 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 Justice.
And do you realize why she took you to paragraph 12?
Yes,
it records in an official policy document that community-based services for mental health care users are not sufficiently developed. That's why Advocate Hasim took you there. That doesn't escape you, does it? Policy tells you NGOs are not ready to receive mental health care users. And you, on the other hand, tell us, I had no reason to doubt incapacity. Can you see the tension? You clearly can. I have no doubt.
Yes, yes, Justice.
Can you deal with it? That's the invitation. That's the question.
Yes, I can see the inconsistency or the contradiction.
Yes.
However, the point is, when you are sitting with competent, well-qualified officials who've not been employed yesterday, who've been in the system, and frankly speaking, I had no reason to doubt their bona fides and the authenticity of the information I'm being given. When they say to me, we had a transport plan, and this is how the patients were transported. This one went with their own transport. This one was transported by EMS. I had no reason to doubt that up until I'm told a contrary information by the ombudsperson who says, well, they were not transported by this, but transported by this. So in the absence of any contrary information given to me, I would not be in a position to doubt the information that I'm being given.
You might miss the point, MEC. The inquiry at this stage is about when you made the decision as leader of the collective. Did you have regard to the policy framework that says community-based services are not adequately developed?
Yes, yes, I was made aware, and also it was indicated to me that MEC were doing everything we can to make sure that indeed we strengthen the NGOs, there's training that is happening, and in all of that. That was continuously indicated that staff has been trained, the NGOs have been trained in number of requirements that they need to comply with, including the care to the patients.
And what about the letters from SADC? They wrote to you and said, we've checked the hospitals, and there is no capacity in the hospitals. Remember where we ended on Friday?
Yes, on Monday.
On Monday?
Yes, Justice.
SADC wrote to you and told you there's no capacity. And blow by blow, every hospital that your people were relying on, and you said, call our lawyers. They are dishonest. That's really what the advocate is talking to you about. And I know you can, and please deal with it.
Justice, any correspondence that I will get or I receive via email or by being delivered in my office, whether I had seen it or have not seen it, but we ensured through my office and myself that every correspondence is sent to the HOD for action, meaning that because I am not the administrator, for these things must be responded to by the HOD. And in some of the documents, there's where the HOD is responding to those concerned and to the issues, assuring, and when I read the document, it assures me that this has been done, this has been done, this has been done. And in the absence of politicians, their responsibility is defined to a certain extent. And administrative responsibilities are being done by professionals, by people who know the law and the framework of the existence of and the mandate of the department concerned.
Ms. Mahlangu, you know, SADC writes to you and tells you of the dangers. Council will go to many other people who have done that. Here are red lights flashing. There's no capacity for mental health care users. And why is that an assurance that everything is in order for Life Esidemini to be shut down? I don't understand that. You get my difficulty. Professionals warn you there are difficulties at hospitals you rely on. Policy framework warns you community-based services are not well developed, and you still decide to shut down Life Esidemini. That calls for an explanation.
Justice Mosenek, the same professionals I work with say to me everything is well. So, and I think it's important to really for us to understand my role and of any politician in any of a government executive as well as that of administrative processes in any government department.
Thank you, Justice. Ms. Mahlangu, your response regarding your role as a politician and letters that are sent to you, are you saying that there's no point writing to you? That the public should not engage you directly?
When the sorry.
Yes, you can answer that.
No, you can finish, sorry. Sorry for interjecting.
The question is, are you saying that the public should not write to you and engage you directly because you are merely the politician?
Thank you, Counsel. When the public writes to me, which I always encourage at all material times in any department where I've served, I'll take I'll refer the issue to a specific official, or if it's a clinic, I'll ask the clinic head to deal with the matter and provide the telephone number of the person concerned and encourage the person, please call me back if indeed you continue to encounter a problem. So in resolving the problem, I would not resolve them myself personally in terms of going going to the pharmacy and taking the medication. Instead, I will make sure that if a person complains about medication, those issues are resolved, specifically relating to the concerns you are raising. Each correspondence I receive that I have knowledge of and that I've seen, I had referred those correspondence to the HOD, who's the head of department. HOD, please, please, please. And the please, please in some of the emails suggest that I was appealing that for agency, that the issues must be attended to as soon as possible.
Are you saying that your response to the SADAG letter and the concerns was a request to the officials to address the concerns?
Absolutely.
And the lawyers were required for that?
Counsel, I explained the angle of the lawyers.
Okay, so you say the lawyers were required in order to engage with civil society?
I did say to you, Counsel, through you, Justice Moseneke, that things, the way things were working in the department, it became difficult to understand what is going where and how. For instance, there is a copy of SMSs I found yesterday as I'm trying to search for answers of some of these things, particularly the email that refers, which I said, these NGOs are dishonest. This is a context. So in engaging with this process throughout, and I think there's a trail of email, you'll see it in the files that is still to be considered. You get an email today, someone replies. You get an email today, someone replies. So in a day, there'll be about 3 or 4 emails. And then tomorrow, an email comes. Is a meeting confirmed, not confirmed, to discuss the said issues. A Saturday is a meeting confirmed, not confirmed, and whatever. So, and I see the correspondence between the HOD and Dr. Manamela and I can't remember the person from Section 7, SADAG, Section 27. And finally, the meeting takes place. Of course, I'm in the legislature. So in that process, there's a lot of issues that arises that sometimes became difficult to appreciate, in the sense that the SMS I'm referring to, for instance, which happened much later. And I beg your indulgence, Senior Justice, to explain. A WhatsApp group is created, and family members are asked to participate and give information in that WhatsApp group. Is created by Section 27. And family members are asked to say, please say the following to this, that the Department of Health did this and that. This is possibly what you can say in that as a response to this question.
Was this a WhatsApp in which you were part of the group?
No, I was not part of the group. I got to be informed about it. And for whatever you are wanting to raise as a concern in response to the guide we've given you, please send a message to this number. and probably the police can look at whose number that is and whatever else, and or the appropriate person can look at that. So when all of those things are happening and many others, it then becomes difficult to know who you're working with, who is genuinely working to support what you are doing, and who's genuinely not in the interest of what we are trying to do. So that is a context, Justice. I had no malice intention of whatever kind to anybody or to be dishonorable, particularly because here we're dealing with a very sensitive issue of when families have lost their loved one.
Fair enough. But let's go back to the issues that Council has been canvassing with you. Have you thought the night before and yesterday, why would Dr. Silibano give you false assurances? Have you thought why, as HOD, he would lie to you outright?
I don't know, Senior Justice. I've been thinking about this, not only from yesterday. I've been thinking about this.
Sorry, let's hear the answer, please. Let's go quiet, yes.
This has preoccupied my mind for the longest of time. And even to date, I still don't have the answer because I have great respect for Dr. Silibano. And I regarded him as a highly qualified professional who became an administrator, who knew what he was doing. So I had no doubt or any reason to believe otherwise, whatever he was telling me.
It will be put to you later, and if they don't, I will. Passages from his evidence where he says, you drove the marathon project. You made the decision. He does also say within the collective, but you were the driver. And there were constant reports made to you about what was happening. Why would he tell an untruth like that?
The reports I have at my disposal, which were presented in meetings, were indicated that things were going okay, and patients or mental health care users are being placed in appropriate NGOs. And again, Justice, I had no reason to disbelieve the HOD.
Okay, let's take Mr. Msinogi. Mr. Msinogi says he pleaded with you. He wrote a letter to you. He pleaded about Baneng, which was in line to be shut down, and actually wrote to you, telling you it will be dangerous to shut down Life Esidemini in that short time and to shut down Baneng completely. Do you remember that kind of communication from him to you?
Through you, Justice Moseneke, yes. I do not remember the said communication. Reason being, on the 3rd of February, because his email is written on the 6th of February, 2016. On the 3rd of February, I was hospitalized at George Mukhari Hospital. His email is written for the 6th of February. I was booked off leave, and we can check the records at George Mukhari. If you need to see the file, we can see the file. And on this, when I was discharged from George Mukhari, I had difficulties with my lower back. I went to Qedani Mahlangu and I did an MRI. Again, I have a file at Qedani Mahlangu, we can check that. And I continued to consult respective doctors at dealing with pain management at Qedani Mahlangu, as well as Helen Joseph, a specialist there. So the email concern from Mr. Moseneke, I saw it when Advocate Ngujane gave me the document. I do not remember the email. However, I do remember a discussion in the meeting, I think it was March, if I'm not mistaken, that when it was, I think it was before March, because we extended the contract after that meeting. The discussion in the meeting was about there is no facility in Gauteng that can accommodate the children who are at Banning. It was discussed in the meeting, and we agreed that we are not going to move the children from Banning. On the basis of that, we also in the same meeting, we agreed after discussion that we will extend the contract. Instead of ending on the 31st of March, it will end on the 30th of June.
Do you know why he would be? He says he was scared of you. And he said you were the driver and you were prepared to agree to only Banning being not shut down. Why would he be untruthful about your role? Do you know?
Justice, maybe I don't know why would someone whom I was working with, every day they come, or every time when we have a meeting, they come to meetings, and all of a sudden they say they were scared of me.
Did you see the passages of the evidence of Dr. Manamela about you?
I read Mosenehi and I read the HOD and Dr. Manamela about fearing me and that I pushed them around to do things.
And you were the driver, you were the decision maker, and they had to take instructions from you. You saw that. She says so.
Justice Moseneke.
No, but did you see that there is evidence?
Yes, I saw that.
Why is she untruthful?
I do not know, because when we sat in meetings, presentations are made, and we take decisions. For instance, Baneng was taken in the same meeting where supposedly people were fearing me. But they raised it in the meeting. And supposedly the issue of extending the contract was raised in the same meeting, and we extended the meeting. If it may suit you, probably you may call the other managers who sat in the meetings, who may not have been doctors, our communications team and our media liaison team, because they said throughout the meetings, at no stage did I sense or have a suspicion that people are afraid of me. I know myself to be a very warm person. So I am not sure when there's an impression that the officials concerned are afraid of me. I'm not sure, Justice. I can't describe that, honestly.
No, ma. If you want to continue screaming and you're identified, it might not be pleasant, please, because we'll have to ask you to leave. I'll really ask you again. She's a witness. She's entitled to give answers because she's being asked questions. So please keep your responses and anger inside you. We have to make progress. Counsel.
Thank you, Justice. If it would assist the process, I do intend to raise some of the questions you've asked with references to the record, and it might make it easier for the witness to answer, if I may come to that in due course.
You should go to that sometime. It was a very high-level question about why all these people would blame the former MEC.
Yes.
But there's a lot of detail there, and you can go to it, please. Thank you.
We were discussing the reason for the termination of the contract, and we were discussing the policy of de-institutionalisation and the warning in the national policy document, and of course there were letters to you. Did you say to any of your officials that no patient should be moved until such time as the NGOs are ready?
That was an assurance we gave throughout the meetings. Not only should that patient should not be moved till they are ready, that patient must have the records or the patient files, and that they must also be assessed by medical doctors, both the psychiatrists as well as medical doctors.
But that assurance wasn't given effect to, isn't that so? Because we know that they were moved without clinical files and to NGOs that were not ready.
Now I know that what happened, but in the documentation and information I have before me, and that was presented before me, suggested that patients were assessed, patients were seen by doctors, and I even remember saying in the meeting, actually one of the doctors, and I saw it in my presentation to Professor Makhoba, that some of the doctors would have suggested that the mental health care users, there must be a phase in and out process. So there must be a weekend or to be taken to the new a place where they're going to go, and they must be brought back to the old institution, and they must be taken back again so that they can be familiarized with those. I remember us discussing those issues and emphasizing to the officials, please attend to those issues.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the core question is, now we know the assurances were never kept. The answer should be yes, now we know, isn't it?
Yes, yes, Justice.
You're not trying to blame you now. We just want to get the facts on record. Now we know, whatever they promised you, it didn't happen because 143 people died,
yes,
and another 1,400 were under severe trauma. Isn't that the answer? Yes, we know.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. And one of the purposes of deinstitutionalization, we're still there, is also to reintegrate mental health care users into the communities, into their communities. Isn't that so?
Yes, it is.
Which would mean placing them close to their communities and families.
Yes.
And that didn't take place, isn't that so?
Yes, I came to understand that was the case. May I elaborate, Justice?
Yes. Very briefly, please. Yes.
From what I was informed, we move patients from 3 institutions to 27 odd institutions. And that gave me comfort when they say, let me see, we've moved people from 3 institutions to 27 institutions across the province, but mainly in Tshwane. So I had no reason to believe that patients were moved, concentrate in one place, because if you move, just common sense tells me that from 3 to 27, it's good progress. However, I do note that when I went to Sirman on, I think it was on the 18th or so of September, there was a family who came to visit their relative, and they complained about the distance, and I asked the officials to assist the family to relocate the mental health care user closer to Soweto. And the patient concerned, the mental care healthcare user said he is not wishing to go. He's happy with the company of the people that was there. So I tried my best to assist, to ask officials to make sure that family members and mental health care users are closer to families. Where I was alerted, Justice, that people were too far and the families needed assistance, I intervened and I asked the officials to move the patient back closer to their families.
Did you ask the officials, apart from that the individual circumstance where the complaint is made to you, did you then say to the officials, it would appear that there is non-compliance with the policy because patients are being placed far from their families? Did you then say to them that they should ensure that the remainder of the patients, to ensure
Yes.
that they are placed close to their families?
Yes, I did.
Not only in the individual cases that were brought to you.
I did ask officials from time to time, particularly post the September period, that can you please make sure that where families, relatives are far from the venues, let's make sure that they are brought closer. And
You say in the post-September period?
Yes, maybe just let me elaborate.
I just want to understand before you elaborate, post-September 2016.
No, I'm saying, but once I found that the 27 NGOs did not cater for the closeness, proximity to the families, I asked them to reassign and continuously engage with the families, particularly to make sure that they know their loved one has been moved from one place to the other.
In the post-September period, can you clarify? You're talking about post-September 2016.
I forgot now. Can you, I forgot the context.
That's why it helps if you answer the question when I ask it. There were many people who were placed far from their families. Reverend Mabwe spoke about having to travel 130 kilometers. Ms. Collins had to travel 100 kilometers. Jabulilo Hlatshwayo had to travel 120 kilometers. Did you know of these particular patients who were far from their families?
I wouldn't be able to know each and every one of them, Justice. However, again, I repeated to the officials, please engage with the families. Where there are great concerns, please make sure that though their concerns are taken into account. And I also was informed that Masiho was the only NGO accommodating geriatric mental health care users. Hence, every patient who had who needed geriatric care and who's a mental health care user needed to be taken to Masiho. That was what I was told when I asked about Masiho specifically, because I found more or less people of the same condition in that regard.
In any event, there wasn't compliance with the policy in that regard, correct? There wasn't compliance with the policy. Can we just agree on that?
I'm saying the aspects of the policy in relation to, and I'm saying the council, my impression was when you move people from 3 institutions to 27, you're dealing with proximity. Because even at Way Valley, when the mental health care users who were at Way Valley, the mother will move from Mamelodi to go to Germiston, and the transportation with a lot of difficulties. So I was under the impression that the 27 NGOs were accommodating and responding to those issues. However, I do know now that not everyone was accommodated closer to their families.
And that was in violation of the policy? Yes.
Pardon?
That taking patients far away from their homes and their loved ones was in violation of policy. And Council wants to know if that is so.
I suppose so, Justice.
It's obviously
You
so,
suppose
isn't
so.
it? It's obviously so. I mean, if you deinstitutionalize and want to get people closer to their communities and to their families, and you take them 130 kilometers away, that is inconsistent with policy. That's quite obvious, isn't it, Ms. Mahlangu?
Ms. Mahlangu, you say that the other reason for the termination of the contract was cost saving. And we've had regard on several occasions now to a report by Professor Freeman. And I'd like you to have a look at it. It's in the exhibits bundle, Ella 2, and it's Annexure 4B. We've got it. Annexure 4B. Oh, sorry, 4A. Brief report with respect to closing of Life Esidemeni in Gauteng is the title. A. And after the 4 bullet points, Professor Freeman, he refers to research and he agrees that deinstitutionalization is a good practice. But in the second sentence, he says, however, deinstitutionalization should not, in capital letters, not be used to save money, as this inevitably results in people with mental illnesses being further abused, increased hospital admissions for acute care, and early mortality. Do you agree with that?
Let's first find out if the witness has found the passage. Have you found the passage? You have been referred to.
Have you found the passage, Ms. Mahlangu?
Yes, I have.
So do you agree with that?
Can you allow me to read it?
I'll read it to you again. However, de-institutionalisation should not, in bold letters, be used to save money, as this inevitably results in people with mental illness being further abused, increased hospital admissions for acute care, and early mortality.
Okay, thank you, Counsel. I do not think that at the time anyone in the department thought that there was going to be loss of life. At least not me, not the HOD, not anybody. I do not think any one of us sat and said this was going to result into loss of life. Indeed, it is regrettable that families have lost their loved one, but it was not it's the unintended consequences of implementing the policy or the decision incorrectly. So, and the point is fair, and it's a genuine point.
You agree with the point?
Yes, but I contextualize my answer to that, Counsel.
He goes on to say the principle that should be adopted is that the money used for persons' care in an institution must follow the patient into the community. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree. And I also, Professor Freeman also would remember, I saw him yesterday briefly on Monday. He would remember my conversation with him and the officials in the department that we should look at increasing or readjusting the stipend or the tariff that the NGOs were being given by government. That is something that we had discussed with Professor Freeman and the officials in the department.
And can you turn over the page and have a look at page 86? Right at the bottom of the page. It's under the heading, The Current Situation in Gauteng. About 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Professor Freeman says, from what we understand, NGOs that could potentially take on more patients are not currently prepared for additional numbers. And even if the subsidy was paid, there are questions about the sufficiency of the amount and the ability of the NGOs to take patients without adequate accommodation, available staffing, and so forth. What do you say to that? Do you agree with it?
Okay, so one of the things, Justice, that we, may I just beg for your indulgence to...
Could you just first say whether you agree?
Justice, may I please be given an opportunity to explain?
Yes, but it's a fair request. A passage is put to you, views of Professor Friedman, and you MEC Health. It's important for us to know whether you agree with the views. And then you could say, but we did it differently, but whatever. But for starters, do you agree with those views? Please take time and read them again.
Okay, thank you, Justice,
Yes.
for giving me a moment. I think the first sentence, I fully agree with that. And then I come to the second sentence, I also...
and the second one is the one that starts from what can be established.
The NGOs will be requested to take on the community care of patients as far as possible.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know, where are you
that.
reading? Okay, the second sentence of that paragraph.
And from what can be established, it's anticipated that patients will be given disability grants currently at 1,420. As far as I understand this, and I think probably colleagues from the department can clarify this, Justice, as far as I understand how the social grants work, is that once a person is institutionalized, that grant ceases to be given to the person directly, but it is given to allocated to the institution where that person is. On the basis of that, then the government tariff or subsidy then tops up that kind of the funding that comes with it. And I know examples of my family members also who ended up needing to be cared for in homes. That was the scenario in that instance. It is possible. The additional amounts to NGOs, as I said earlier, that I had a discussion with Dr. Professor Freeman, myself, and Dr. Manamela, and I think Hannah was present. We were doing one of the workabouts, if I'm not mistaken, it was Sirman. We agreed, or it was Sterkfontein, that there has to be an increment and looking at additional resources that must be given to NGO, because the tariffs that they were being given on monthly basis per patient was not sufficient for them to care enough. And in addition to that, the issues of staffing, I also discussed it with Dr. Freeman, was that issues relating to staffing, particularly to professional nurses, it was important that government should consider employing those qualified nurses to be employed and then to be delegated.
I'm not sure which question you're answering now.
I'm dealing with this paragraph and I'm giving the broader context.
Well, no, you're not answering the question still.
I did.
No, you didn't. I asked you. I read it twice to you. From what we understand, NGOs that could potentially take on more patients are not currently prepared for additional numbers and so on and so on. I asked you whether you agree with that view of Professor Freeman.
Well, indeed, we're just coming out there of the Life Esidemini Arbitration Hearings. Currently, former Health MEC of Gauteng, Qedani Mahlangu, is under testimony. Let's cross now live to Cape Town, where Democratic Alliance leader Mzimamane is briefing the media on a multidisciplinary program of action to actually deal with the management of averting Day Zero.
Municipalities in South Africa. When it comes to the question of augmentation, I'm often asked...
You need to answer my question before you go elsewhere, please.
The question relates to from what we understand from that sentence.
So based on the facts, on the things that up until I left on the 1st of February, so this will be the, if this was drafted at the time, I think it is correct. I do not know now what the situation is, and I have no authority to speak about it.
Thanks. Thank you. So if we could turn over, and this is the last aspect of this report that I wish to put to you, and it's in the second paragraph of page 87. And it begins at the second sentence. While Gauteng Health have said that some provision would be made for funding of community care, they have also said that they cannot afford Life Esidemini, and therefore the principle that the money should follow the patient into the community will, it appears, not be followed. So we've discussed the principle of the importance of the money following the patient. You said you agree with that. And what do you say to this? Because it seems obvious, isn't it, that if you can't afford 320 Rand per patient, the money would not follow the patient into the community.
As far as I understand through Justice, I don't know the actual details, whatever nitty-gritties of those nuts and bolts. The department, if you look at one of the documents I have here, I think you may have it in one of the files. that talks about the budget over a period of 5 years that the Department of Health was spending relating to Life Esidemeni, and I beg for indulgence, Justice Moseneke. In 2011, 2012, the department would allocate 194 million. It would spend 209 million. Throughout these years, there was over expenditure. In 2012-13, it will be 203 million budgeted. The expenditure will be 224 million, and then so forth and so forth. The figures are here in black and white. So what is my point? When the matter comes before, let me just finish all the numbers. In 2013-14, the budget would have been 213 million. The department will spend, the end up spend expenditure will be 234 million. 2014-15, the expenditure would have been 250, budget will be 251 million, building into what would have been spent in the previous financial year, probably and add inflation. Then the expenditure jumps into 353 million. And then in 2015-16, when we started managing the process and managing the contract in that sense, the budget was 265 million, but we spent 176 million. What am I driving at is that indeed functions, money must follow function, and that is government policy throughout. But because of the competing needs across the system, in my presentation on Monday at Justice Moseneke, I spoke about the robbing pillar. And that is just a difficult position that the CFO of the Department of Health find them, and the HOD find themselves under those circumstances that in many instances they have to move the budget around. Yes, I agree with the principle that money must follow function, and it's a noble principle. However, with the budget constraints and that that we are facing during this period, and I don't know now.
But did money follow the patient in the marathon project?
As far as I'm concerned, resources were allocated, including appointment of staff. I don't know actually the exact amount of money that.
In real terms, knowing what you know now,
I do not have the numbers
set out there by Professor Freeman, which you acknowledge properly so. Did the money follow the patients?
I do not have the 16-17 budget there. I don't know how much was spent on the NGOs.
Knowing what happened at the NGOs now, did the money follow the patients?
Justice, I won't
were
answer
nurses
with authority.
Appointed and paid for this? Was there medication that followed the patients? Were the NGOs adequately resourced financially? Were they paid while the patients were there? We have facts on those things. We don't need the facts from you. We know already. And you know by now. Did the money follow the patients?
So I'm not sure, Justice. I'm not sure.
Counsel?
I do not have the figures in front of me, so I don't want to sit here and lie to you on just whatever.
Thanks, Justice. What we do know is that the government was spending 320 Rand per patient per day at Life Esidemeni. And then through the Marathon project, opted to spend 112 Rand per patient per day for those patients who were being moved to NGOs. And as a result, health services that patients had been receiving, they no longer received. Isn't that so?
I know the issues of food, I know that those were the concern, and the expenditure you're referring to, it is accurate. But I do know that government continued to supply medication as they were doing when the patient was still alive.
But deal with the questions. The drop in number, in cost per day per patient, do you concede to that as accurate?
I think so, Justice.
Regarding the reason for the termination as being a cost-saving measure, you had reported to the legislature that 416 patients would go to VES copies. But we know that at VES copies it would cost 1,960 Rand per patient per day. So that would not have been a cost saving. It would have been actually 6 times more. Isn't that so?
Counsel, I do not know what it costs to pay to look after what patients. So I trusted that when the official sends, someone must go to Vescopis and the expenditure is high. And remember, Vescopis, the expenditure will be high in the sense that it's a training platform. You have academics being trained at Vescopis. Similarly, when I go and get a flu treatment at Charlotte or I go to the clinic, it will be expensive for me to be treated at Charlotte for flu than to go to a clinic and be treated there. So that's a difference for patients who are at Vescopis vis-a-vis those who will be at Kalinin. So that's my understanding of the cost of the different hospitals and why it will be expensive in an academic hospital and it will be cheaper in a district or at the clinic level.
Thanks. But I'm not comparing the hospitals just yet. I'm just comparing what was being spent on the patients at Life Esidemeni and then the transfer to Vescopis, where you would be paying 6 times more. So there are many reasons why it is that expensive. And there may be very good reasons, as you're trying to tell us. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the mere fact that it was much more expensive.
Simply because Vescopis is an academic platform and it's an academic institution, therefore it will be expensive to care for anybody.
So it didn't save costs. In other words, you were not saving.
But it means those patients needed to be cared for. In terms of the assessment of the professionals, the clinician, they made a determination that those mental health care users were fit to be treated as Vescopis or as Sterkfontein in particular.
So they were not, actually those users had to be moved from Life Esidemeni not because of the termination of the contract anyway. It's because they needed to be institutionalized at Vescopis.
They needed to be given better care, and I think Vescopis became an appropriate fit for them to be taken there, and the cost is associated with the caliber of medical professionals you'll find in an institution like Vescopis, Sterkfontein, as well as Qedani Mahlangu or Charlotte.
So the reason then for moving the patients is because they needed to get better care, you say?
Yes.
So then the reason for terminating the contract with Life Esidemeni is because the patients were not receiving adequate care at Life Esidemeni. Is that what you're now saying?
You know, Justice, may I present to you a document that I'd like us, with your indulgence, that I beg you to allow me to submit it as evidence.
Is it a document in the files which are...
It's in the files that my counsel was referring to.
And on what page in the file is it? Or you can just identify it. You can just identify
just give me a few
the
minutes.
date and the title.
I think it will be Annexure I of the documents that I have before me.
Yes. So it's Annexure I to your main statement that you read.
No. Annexure I in my files, in the indexation that has been done by.
Yes. And what part of that? Yes.
So it's gonna. Could I ask that the witness please answer the question, and if the question doesn't need a document to answer. If she wishes to explain, I have no objection to that.
I understand that, but the witness believes it needs reference to a document. So we're not going to limit the witness in that regard. If the answer she thinks must be sourced from a document, let's allow her to look at the document and give you the answer. But I'm not going to stop her from referring to the document at this stage. I would like her to identify the document and then answer you in relation to the document. Ms. Mahlangu? What is the name of the document and what is its date? And is it in the bundle that your lawyer circulated this morning?
Yes, Justice, it is in the bundle that it was referred to. I think
And what page of the bundle, please?
It will be page 239. And I'm not referring the whole of that. And the issue here, I'm referring to really the assumption a council is... No, not the answer.
Let me tell you what, it is 11:29. So I'm going to take the tea break now.
Okay.
Again, impress that on your counsel. And there must have a discussion with Advocate Guchana so that it must be easier for us to identify the documents. They know what the procedure is in an arbitration or a court. Documents are handed up in a particular way that has not been complied with. But they must work in the next 30 minutes and try and make it easy for us to access the documents. Whether or not they'll form part of the evidence is a decision that is made by the trier of fact at the end of the hearing. So I'd like those documents to be systematized in a way that will make reference to them easier. And we have 30 minutes in which to deal with that issue. Absent any comment from council, I'm going to take the tea break now. And we resume at 12 o'clock. We're adjourned.
Your shoes, they'll give you a shoes fee before you get the stage, man.